With just a few things left to do before the theater room is finally complete, I try my hand at making my own acoustic panels. Spoiler alert, they were a success, but not without some mistakes along the way. I have 4 of these just hanging out until I can figure out what to do with them one day. So like I said, my first foray into making acoustic panels was a success. However, things weren't perfect or ideal. For starters, having never done carpentry or woodworking of any kind, I really lacked the proper tools and equipment to do the job. Anyone who has done this type of work before will probably cringe watching me cut pieces of wood laying across a couple of step stools with a circular saw, and rightfully so, because honestly, I cringe just looking at this footage too. I was also using a Dollar Tree ruler to make the marks for cutting, so yeah. Needless to say, this was the only day I did things like this. I was able to get a couple of panels done this way though, and the floor made a great working surface, though in retrospect I probably should have worn pants. But you can clearly see the acoustic panel frames take shape, and that's the most important part. Overcoming obstacles in order to get things done. Having both the cordless drill and impact came in super handy too, because I could use one for drilling the pilot holes and one for securing the screws. Now, a quick trip to Harbor Freight Tools the next day made things go a lot smoother, and I was able to knock out the next 7 acoustic panel frames much more quickly. I also decided to cut all the wood for the panels in one go this time, so it was more of an assembly line workflow and a bit more efficient. Now, this still wasn't the most ideal way to do things, but for a guy on a budget and the time to do it, this worked wonderfully. I still used the floor to screw everything together though, because I didn't buy a big enough workbench. I then brought the frames inside to attach the weed blocker fabric, which will help keep the rock wool contained inside. The weed blocker fabric also adds some extra protection in preventing the insulation fibers from becoming airborne inside the theater room. It's also fairly cheap and is extremely breathable, so the impact on the sound absorption of the rock wool will be negligible. And it was here that I really wish I would have gotten an electric staple gun. Instead, I decided I wanted to advance my carpal tunnel much more quickly, while also giving myself a bit of tendonitis in the process, so I consider that a win. The fabric I went with was black hopsack linen from Joann's. Honestly, getting the fabric tight on the panels and making sure the corners looked great was my biggest concern, as I wanted these things to look great and professional. I ended up taking notes on fabric stretching and folding from a video on YouTube called DIY Acoustic Panels by Lonely Rocker, which resulted in perfect corners and a really nice looking panel. I'll leave a link to the video in the description if you'd like to follow his guide. I also marked the center point at the top and bottom of each panel, which I'll go over in a second. So here we have the final complete acoustic panels all finished, just 2 of them obviously. I have one facing front and then one facing back, so we can kind of take a look at both. Now if I get up close, you can actually see the texture of the black hopsack linen. I really like the look of this fabric. It wasn't the cheapest, and I spent a little more than I originally anticipated, but I really like how it looks. You can see the corners are pretty good. They are not perfect, and that's okay. Honestly, they are square enough that you don't really notice, especially from further back. They just look fine. So on the back here, you see all the staples I have, and then remember the center markings? Well, actually it was for this. So at the top and at the bottom of each panel, I have these little spacers. Now the spacers on the bottom have these little furniture slider things on the very corners, just so they sit flush against the wall. And then the top actually has the mounting bracket, and you'll notice I labeled this one R3. Why would I do that? Well, when I take them down to do tests and measurements, I know exactly where they all go. So R3 right here, this one is R2, and then if we go over here, we got R2 right there. So that just makes it easy to take them down, put them back up really quickly. Now in retrospect, I probably should have made them a bit wider. I was just using scrap I had left over. So they wobble a little bit on the wall when you first put them on, but once you actually get them on the wall and they're level, they stay put. They don't really go anywhere, so no worries there. And if you notice here, we have about an inch gap already in between the weed killer fabric here where the rock wool stops, which is 3 inches. So we have about an inch gap right here, and these add another 1.75 inches total. So we're at 2.75 inches off of the wall, which again, I don't have a ruler. But if you're not familiar with acoustic panels, you want to try to match the actual depth of the insulation itself and basically double that. So for a 3-inch panel, you want a total of 6 inches into the room, which I'm just shy of that, but that's just to make sure that the panels are as effective as possible. And I gotta say, it works really well. Now, in terms of placement, you'll notice I have these two things here. I have another panel right up here. Basically, I just kind of stuck my head right in the center of the seat here in between the armrests and had my wife basically walk around with a mirror across the whole of the room on the sides here, wherever I could feasibly put panels. And those are just all the first reflection points. So basically I could see the speaker reflection here, the speaker reflection here, and then the speaker reflection here. And you'll notice on the opposite side, I did the same thing. So we have that there, and then we actually have one back here. And I basically put this one here because I originally wanted to put it right here. Well, I didn't really want to drill into the bifold doors. I didn't really have time to make a mount that goes from up there to down there. I also wanted it removable because I actually need access to this closet. So I just decided to go with a 2 right here for now. Further down the road, I may end up making an adjustment here, making a bracket that comes down that I can remove. But that's all stuff I could do later down the road. So to hang the panels is relatively easy. I use these Hillman brackets here. They're relatively inexpensive. I think they come in a pack of 2 or 3. And they include screws. I actually put drywall anchors in here to make them even further secure, so I'm not too worried about them kind of coming out over time. But basically, I labeled these, so R3, match it up to R3, and then we just line it up in the back, put it on there, and then the last part of the puzzle is we just use a little level to make sure it's level. So we can see it's kind of off level here, so just kind of adjust it until it's where it needs to be, and that's it. Now, I had originally planned on making 12 acoustic panels total because that was how many bats of insulation I had, 9 to put on the walls and 3 to hang from the ceiling above the main listening position. The panels on the walls went on easy enough, but I was racking my brain trying to figure out how to hang 3 panels from the drop ceiling. Do I somehow secure them to the joists? Do they make hanging attachments for drop ceilings, for this kind of thing? I then realized that instead of hanging them from the ceiling, why not just make 4 2x2 tile size panels for the drop ceiling instead? I'd already done all the work putting the drop ceiling in, and this would provide nearly the same result as hanging panels above. Now, after some quick math, I knew that 3 pieces of rock wool that I had left would be a perfect fit for 4 2x2 panels, so I got to work making those 4 24-inch by 24-inch frames for acoustic panels that would go in the drop ceiling. But wait, the 2x2 drop ceiling tiles are not actually 24 inches by 24 inches, but instead 23 7/8 by 23 7/8, so yeah. I'd like to tell you that I realized I made this mistake while making the frames, but I didn't. And I didn't realize it when I put the grass blocker fabric on or when I wrapped them in the fabric. Nope. Only when I went to put them in the ceiling did I realize my mistake. That means that I had to gut the old panels to get the rock wool out, and that was easy enough, honestly. Now, thankfully, I did have enough fabric and weed blocker material to make the new ones, as recycling the old material after it was already cut was a no-go. I also didn't feel confident cutting the lumber after it was already screwed together, so I just ended up buying a few more 1x3x8s, and that was that. So now I have 4 of these just hanging out until I can figure out what to do with them one day. So basically I had to make the panels all over again, this time with the proper dimensions, and they fit perfectly. So as you can see, they do actually fit perfectly. Now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and the reason I put them right here instead of right here is you noticed I actually relocated the Atmos speakers. So if you recall the last video, I actually had them right about here. I'll insert like a little clip right now so you could see exactly where they are when I put them in. They were a little too far from the main listening positions here. I say positions because technically this is the center of the room. I sit here, my wife sits here. They were a little too far that way, so just move them over and slightly towards the front, as you can see. The distance is about, let's see, if we go from this side, so it's about 1/4 of the way into the room there, and then we go over here, and then again, it's about a 1/4 of the way into the room over there. I've watched a few videos, especially from Home Theater Gurus with Stephen Smith. I've actually been talking to him quite a bit, and he's had some recommendations about what I could do to improve this room even further, one of which is actually take these acoustic panels and move them down And I wish I would have talked to him about that before I put them up, because I really don't feel like moving them down. So that may be something I do later down the road. But anyway, the Atmos speakers in the new position definitely improve the sound a ton. I actually get more of a bubble of sound, and that is really awesome. And you'll notice I have a light up here in the drop ceiling with a panel over there. I'll show you the HVAC stuff. So this vent is the original vent, the white vent that was in the house before, and I just spray painted it matte black with a can of spray paint, did a couple coats, and I think it turned out great. Now originally I had planned on putting a 2x2 air diffuser there, and I actually got one, put it in, and it did like absolutely horrible. And I think the biggest issue with that is the CFM rating of the AC system isn't high enough. Those diffusers are meant for like office buildings and stuff with really high output, and there's a bunch of them. There's only one in this room. I have no other AC things in here, so that didn't work. So I ended up going back to the drawing board, and I did something like this. And let me walk over here and I'll show you exactly what I did. So if we get up on the step stool here, you can see that I actually have a insulated duct boot. So it goes from a rectangular duct to a circular duct. And then I have some just 6-inch AC duct going over here. And then same thing, I have the rectangular duct here, and then that converts to a 6-inch circular duct. So that's insulated as well. And I'm losing no air whatsoever. Now I've taped this up here with some mastic tape, and that really helps. But I've also screwed this in over here. I didn't apply any sealant. I may do that down the road if it becomes too much of an issue, but this made a massive difference and cooled the room a ton. But there was still one issue. The biggest culprit of all the heat in the room was this big arch window. I was just having a tough time, and so what I actually did was I used an old box I had. It's actually from the 85-inch Vizio P-Series Quantum X that we purchased last year, and then I sold this year. But I still had the box, so I made 2 sets here. You see I actually was going to staple them in. That didn't work, so I just used some drywall screws. On the back here, you'll notice there's some little kind of silver stuff. That's actually attic insulation called Reflectix. This right here made a massive difference. Around this time, it's around 1 to 2 p.m. in the day right now, it would get around 85 to 86 degrees in here, regardless if the AC stuff was working or not. It was just absolutely horrific. If I was in here playing a game or whatever, it would get even warmer. It would get up to about 87. That's a no-go. But look at what it's at right now. It's at 74. Now, technically, yes, this is with the vent blowing right on it. So if I move it over here and let it chill out for a little bit, it's normally around 76 in here, which is perfect. That's what we keep the house at. And then obviously if I come in here and start gaming or whatever, especially on the Series X or the PS5, those things do put out some heat. The OLED put out some heat. The receiver puts out heat. All this stuff puts out heat. So it does get a little warmer in here, but it rarely ever goes above 77 to 78. And what I can do is I could just lower the overall thermostat to like 74 while I'm in here, and then bring it back up when I'm done. So with that said, the room is finally done. Well, mostly. The lamps on the left and right side of the room are still placeholders until I can afford something else. I kind of went over budget on the theater room as it is, so I'm more than happy to wait a little longer on lighting. And honestly, the lights are off in the room 90% of the time anyway, so I'm in no real hurry. But I think the room turned out fantastic considering I did all of this by myself for the very first time. I mean, I didn't even think I could do it, but here we are. Now, would I do things differently a second time around? Absolutely, and I'll be talking a bit about that in the next and final episode of the build series. Now in that final video, I'll go over each process in the series, talking about what and how I did things, while also discussing what future Brad, me now, would tell past Brad to do to make his home theater build go a bit more smoothly. I'll also go over some measurements in Remy QWizard of the room before and after the acoustic panels, and just generally wrap things up. Also, I'm planning a live stream after that final video with a very special guest, as he himself recently spent a ton of time and effort converting an old shed into a dedicated home theater / product review room. I actually can't wait to talk to him about it. I've been a big fan of his for a long time. It's something you definitely don't want to miss though, so make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on, as I'll be posting the live stream schedule soon. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought of this video and the build series so far. If you would have done something differently or have any suggestions for the room, let me know too. You never know who reads the comments, and someone else might come along and find your insight very valuable. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.